So I'll call the meeting to order this morning for the Legislative Committee. And we have with us at our remote locations, we have Mayor McCallan. Good morning, Mayor. We have Supervisor Rutherford. Good morning. I believe we have, do we have Council Member Buscaino? Where is he?
He's in the bottom right.
Bottom right. Morning, Joe. You're so far away.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
And we don't yet have Dr. Parker or Supervisor Nelson, but we expect them to come as well. But we have a quorum, so we can go ahead and start. Am I missing anyone? No, I think I have recognized everybody. So we will go through our usual routine here and call on our advocates in Washington to update their written reports and tell us what's happening in DC. So first up we have the Carmen Group, and I believe we'll have Gary Hoitzma from the Carmen Group. Good morning, Gary, how are you?
Very good. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My report will focus on the executive branch, the White House and federal agencies with issues of interest. Just a few quick updates. I mean, here in Washington, we've got a continuing resolution passed to December 22nd. It looks like tax reform is on its way to completion. The optimistic view from the White House is that could be completed by as soon as next week, but I'll leave that to others to focus on from the Hill perspective. Just quickly from my report there, we talked about the EPA's proposal to repeal the glider provisions, applying the heavy truck Phase 2 emissions rules to the glider industry. The EPA here is proposing to repeal that, and they did hold a public forum, a hearing earlier this week on Monday for public comment on that, and SCAQMD was there in full force with Wayne and company, and they testified, and about 60 other individuals and groups testified on that issue, almost 99% of which were opposed to the EPA's proposal here, pointing out the impact on emissions that this would have. The only prominent voice in support of the EPA rule was the Owner-Operators Independent Drivers Association, arguing that this would help the glider industry by relieving them of federal mandates, so to speak. So that was a very interesting discussion there. Public comment period on that is open until January 5th for anyone that wants to comment further on that. We took the opportunity that day, Monday, to arrange a meeting with at the EPA with the new Assistant Administrator for Air and Radiation, Bill Wareham, who had just been confirmed the month before. We had a constructive meeting there with Wayne and his team. That was a good meeting. Bill was saying there that he was the only Senate confirmed appointee at the EPA other than the administrator, and looks like the Senate has just confirmed Susan Bodine, I think just yesterday, to the Assistant Administrator for Enforcement and Compliance Assurance position. So we note that here today. Turning quickly to one other note on the appointments front is Andrew Wheeler is still in the queue to be Deputy Administrator of EPA, and the expectation is he'll be confirmed before Congress goes out this year. One other quick note from the EPA again, they've here on November 30th, just a few days ago, they issued their final rule on the renewable fuel standard. which sets the volume requirements for ethanol, biofuels, biodiesel, and how much of those should be blended into the fuel supply. And that's always of strong interest. It's an issue that pits the farm states against the oil states, so to speak, and it looks like EPA kind of split the difference, and nobody's really happy with what the either side of that, how it came out. And just yesterday, President Trump had a meeting with a group of senators and others on that issue from the oil industry, and he kind of tasked them to try to get together with the other side and split the difference and try to get their act together and work together on it. So it's an open issue going forward there. So anyway, I'd be happy to answer any questions on that or anything else. That concludes my report today. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Gary. Does anyone have questions of Gary? Anybody in our committee? Seeing none, we thank you for that report and for the updates. And we're glad to see the government will stay open for another couple weeks. Pardon?
Can the public ask questions or no?
I think not. When the public comment is available, we'll allow you to ask questions, and I think our consultants will still be on the line then. Would that be correct? Or after every report?
If it's about this report,
Okay.
not on other things.
Okay. Is it about this report?
Yes.
Harvey? Okay, yes, please.
This is the first.
We need you to come up here so that everyone can hear you. So this is Harvey Eder, who is one of our regular attendees at our meetings. This is for the benefit of our consultants who can't see you, Harvey. So
Okay.
Good morning.
Morning. I'm Harvey Eder, speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition. I guess I'm revealing my ignorance, but this is the first time I've heard of this glider program. And my interest is in solar renewables and the transition. And I was wondering if there was anything mentioned about that and this applying to electric vehicles, the fact that there are already kits with the frame and cab and whatnot. And I just wondered if that was touched on in this at all. And if not,
Do you want to
I'd like
explain
to
or
bring
ask
it
Matt
up.
to explain?
Yeah, the glider provisions refers to older diesel engines that have basically been, the vehicle has been in an accident. And what they do is they'll take the engine and they'll put it in a new chassis. So whether it's the cab and the wheels. So what it basically does is it says you can use these old engines. EPA had said this was a loophole and they had moved to repeal that ability. So this has nothing to do with electric, with solar or anything like that. It's basically addressing a loophole that allowed these older engines to continue to be used. And these gliders are called that because it's just basically taking the powertrain and putting it in a new chassis. And so the testimony focused on allowing these older, higher polluting engines without any type of pollution controls to continue to operate in the market when they should actually have been phased out. And the comments really focused on the fact that these engines really, by repealing this provision of the rule, the phase 2 rule, you would be undoing all of the investments that have been made under the Diesel Emission Reduction Act, which is, again, trying to incentivize the replacement of those older engines. So let me restate that. So solar or electricity has nothing to do with this rule, and it's not a consideration. Consideration is just these older engines, whether or not they should be allowed to be used in the new chassis.
well, thank you, but I see, this thing with drivetrains and other parts, that this is an opportunity for those interested in solar electric vehicles.
It really isn't, Harvey.
Well, I mean, the fact that there are groups that are studying this for electric, I know, like for drivetrains.
But that's completely separate
Okay.
from this
Well,
provision.
I'm just saying as a source of information, there might be information out there that might be helpful, and I'd like to get involved in the process.
So on new engines and things like that, certainly. But on this particular provision of the Phase 2 rule, it's a very narrow issue. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Well, I want to get educated about the industry in general.
Sure.
My interest is much broader than just this rule.
Okay.
Thank you, Harvey. Thanks for your comments. Is there anybody else that wants to comment on this rule? Okay, seeing no one here, any committee members want to comment or ask questions?
Harvey.
Do I hear somebody? No, okay. Oh, I see Dr. Parker's here. Good morning, Dr. Parker. Thank
Good
you.
morning, I'm sorry I'm late, but
Is
I was
traffic-
detained by the traffic
Traffic's a
on
little
Sunset
heavy over here.
Boulevard.
Well, I want you to know we've been thinking about you and what's going on in your neighborhood and hoping that everything will settle down, we'll get the fires contained and you'll be safe. Okay.
Thank you very much.
We've just heard from the Carmen Group, and I'm going to move on now to the Cassidy and Associates to Amelia Jackson, I believe, is on the phone with us this morning. Good morning, Amelia.
Good morning. It's Amelia with Cassidy and Associates. We've been thinking about everyone in the basin. Both Kai and Caleb from our firm were out there this week, and it just seems that it's been very difficult, so we're thinking about you all. I do have two quick updates from our report that should be of interest to you. Both of the updates relate to EPA Administrator Pruitt's testimony before the House Energy and Commerce Committee. For the first time, Administrator Pruitt testified before the committee, and two California members raised issues of interest to the AQMD. Congresswoman Matsui specifically asked Administrator Pruitt about the California waiver and what he's doing with the state in terms of the waiver. And he assured Congresswoman Matsui that he was engaged with the state, he would do outreach to the state. Congresswoman Matsui then made a reference to the administrator's philosophical interest in states' rights, to which, and I'm going to read this quote, we've sent it to staff, we sent the whole exchange to staff, but this is an interesting quote from the administrator. Federalism principles don't say one state can dictate to the rest of the country the standard for the entire country. A multitude of considerations with respect to the waiver, and they will be considered in due time. So he did not commit to maintaining the California waiver, and when asked about states' rights, his frame of reference was that one state cannot dictate for the rest of the country. The second issue that was brought up, that should be of interest to AQMD, was brought up by Congressman Ruiz as he asked Administrator Pruitt about the Clean Power Plan and the rewrite of the Clean Power Plan. And Congressman Ruiz asked if he was reversing EPA's position on the health effects of particle pollution, to which the administrator responded, he's not reversing the position of EPA, he's replacing the plan. So I just bring that up for you to know that these issues were vetted with the administrator, and we will work with staff to see if there's any follow-up with these two members in particular to support the issues that they raised with the administrator. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Very, very interesting developments. Any questions from our committee members on Amelia's report, either written or verbal? Seeing none, I will ask I usually don't do this. Is anyone in the audience allowing public comment on Amelia's report? Artie says no. Okay. Thank you, and we'll move on to Kadish and Associates. Mark Kadish is with us this morning. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. We also want to pass along our sympathies and concerns about the fire, and obviously we're concerned about everyone's safety, but we should also let you know that the House of Representatives has prepared a $4.4 billion package for the Northern California fires, and we would suspect, obviously, once things settle down there, that as we look at the supplemental, that there may be some effort on Southern California. And in terms of air quality, obviously the impact, in addition to all of the damage and destruction, is on air quality from those fires. And we'll continue to work and see if, as we do a supplemental, there might be some opportunity. We'll work with Derek Alatorre and his team to see if there's any opportunities there on the air quality issue, if there is a supplemental, or when there is a supplemental for the fires. Just to follow up on our report, I think Gary mentioned on the top of the briefing that the continuing resolution has been passed until December 22nd, and it's expected that that will probably, by the time Congress adjourns for the Christmas break, that there would probably be another continuing resolution until mid-January. As you can see from our report, there were a number of issues that obviously matter a great deal to us in terms of funding. As you know, the Senate Interior Appropriations Subcommittee did not mark up a bill, but they did produce a bill that will be part of the conference, and we've gone through, and you can see in the report, some of the key issues that we're continuing to follow: the ERA Targeted Airshed Grant 103, 105. And I'll just note that while the committee didn't make any direction, following up on what Wayne Nastri just said, they did take note of the glider issue and asked that the agency report to them on the glider issue. So really just laying down a marker at this point that they're keeping an eye on what EPA is doing. We'll continue to lobby these issues. There are obviously differences in the House and Senate numbers, and we'll continue to work with the AQMD staff there and continue to push for those numbers that we support. So that's really our briefing, our update from our briefing. So we're happy also to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mark. Any questions from committee members? Any comment from the public? Seeing none, thank you so much. And then we'll move to state legislation and Gonzalez and Sons. Paul Gonzalez, I believe, is on the line with us. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. I just wanted to provide one quick brief update. As you know, the legislature is in recess right now, and they're scheduled to come back January 3rd. However, yesterday it was announced that there will be a new Senate President Pro Tem. Former Assembly Speaker and now State Senator Toni Atkins was announced that she will be the next Pro Tem of the State Senate, and she will be the very first female Pro Tem in the state's history. So once again, setting some landmarks and creating some new history here in Sacramento. The official vote will actually take place in January, but the caucus came out united behind State Senator Toni Atkins. And we had this conversation yesterday, my dad and brother and I, about when was the last time a Assembly Speaker actually became the Pro Tem. And you have to go back to the 1860s before you find a Assembly Speaker who actually came over to be a Pro Tem. So very excited for Senator Atkins. She's a fantastic person, wonderful to work with, and I think she'll be a great Pro Tem. So we do expect to see some changes next year in the leadership team and in committees, see a little bit of reshuffling. But I expect to see a lot of the committee chairs will stay the same, especially in Senate Transportation and Housing and other places where they've been pretty consistent. So we will continue to keep you guys apprised as those changes are made. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Paul. That's really interesting. I don't think we knew the historical significance of this, so thank you so much for that. Any questions?
I have one question.
Happy holidays.
Yes, happy holidays to you. Dr. Parker has a question. Go ahead, Dr. Parker.
When do you think the change will actually physically occur?
You know, they didn't announce when the change will actually occur. The vote will take place early in January. And I think on the natural, what you'll see is everybody will start shifting over to Senator Atkins. Now that Pro Tem De Leon has announced his run for U.S. Senate, it's really hard to be the leader of the caucus when you're focused on something else. And you'll see, I think, a pretty quick shift and transition over to Senator Atkins.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Any public comment on Mr. Gonzalez's report? Seeing none. We'll move on to Gonzalez, Quintana, Hunter, and Cruz. And we have Jacob Moss with us this morning. Good morning, Jacob.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. I don't have a lot to add. Paul pretty much laid out the goings-on in the last month or two, considering that everyone's in recess. I think the only thing I might add is this the sort of ongoing sexual harassment topic and revelations will likely continue for the next year or so as things come out and hearings happen, and so that's going to be sort of a hot topic and at the forefront of everyone's awareness as the legislature progresses on the side. And that's really all I have.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions for Jacob? Seeing none here. Any public comment? Seeing none here. Thank you so much. And we'll move on to our recommended 20 legislative goals and objectives. And Derek will have a report for us.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. Included in your packet today is the 2018 proposed goals and objectives for the agency, both at the state and federal levels. These two sets of objectives and goals are intended to, again, protect public health and facilitate attainment of the state and federal air standards for the district. We are going to be working and serving as a resource to our legislators both in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C., as well as the governor, the White House, federal and state agencies, local agencies, business, environmental, and community groups, as well as environmental justice groups and other stakeholders. Both the federal and state legislative goals and objectives focus on, again, seeking increased funding for our air programs that protect public health, but also help us meet the state and federal attainment goals, or standards, I'm sorry. And particularly what's important is our incentive programs that support the 2016 AQMP. We also want to ensure that the state and federal governments do their fair share to reduce air pollution in our district by providing legislative funding and regulatory support to our district to implement the 2016 AQMP and also meet the national air quality standards by the upcoming deadlines. Another one of our goals and objectives is to support policies and funding that promote the development and deployment of zero and near zero emission infrastructure, equipment, and vehicles. We also plan on protecting and ensuring the adequate authority that the district has for implementations of the board's clean air policies and programs required by the state and federal law, including the 2016 AQMP. We plan on supporting legislation and policies and administrative actions that encourage job retention, creation, and promote economic growth while working toward attainment of the clean air standards. And lastly, we would like to support legislation and funding to promote environmental justice initiatives that, one, reduce localized air risk from criteria pollutant and toxic air emissions, and also develop and expand access to clean air technology in those communities that actually will directly impact and give benefits to these impacted communities. In particular, this includes securing the necessary resources to fully implement the Air District's responsibilities for AB 617. And lastly, staff does recommend the proposed 2018 state and federal legislative goals and objectives be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek, for that report. Are there comments from our committee members?
Madam Chair, one of the goals and objectives that we had when we passed the HMP was that we attempted to raise enough money to incentivize various industries to switch over to various different kinds of activities that would basically help us to meet those goals and objectives. Two questions, and this may be for Mr. Nastri. Based upon what's going on and the potential to reduce criteria and various different objectives that have been set, that has in fact happened at the federal level, would that have an impact on reducing the amount of dollars that we are going to be looking at? Originally, I think we had said we need an average of about $1 billion a year for the next 4 or 5 years in order to meet the HUMP goals. What effect will that have on what we have been able to achieve thus far? And I assume that we are probably 65% toward that $1 billion goal for this past year. What do you see for the future?
Well, for the future, I would say, as I gaze out at my crystal ball, that we're going to have our hands full. I think that the administration has made very clear what they want to do with EPA, and that is to drastically scale it back. The administration, in their last budget proposal, cut back nearly 30% on a lot of the programs. I think where I sort of see hope and real action, though, is with Congress. In particular, I think we have to look to Congressman Calvert, who, as chair of appropriations for EPA, has a tremendous say in terms of what actually happens. And as a big supporter of ours, he actually put in additional funding from the previous budget for the targeted airshed grants. The 103, 105 for the monitoring were maintained whole. So even though the administration had made these sweeping proposals to scale back funding for the agency, Congress in its wisdom has said that's too much. And when you look at some of the air quality issues, we think more needs to be invested. So I'm optimistic with regards to where we stand on air quality. And all the discussions that many of us had, including yourself, Dr. Parker, we've met with members, we've met with senators who understand the importance of clean air and the need to maintain those investments. So we're continuing to do a number of different things. One is maintaining to keep them aware and to continue to educate them on the issues. The other aspect is making sure that at the local level, people understand the importance of these programs so that they in turn can also make sure that not only are we being held accountable, but their elected officials are being held accountable. So as you also heard earlier today, we met with the new assistant administrator for Office of Air and Radiation. And in that meeting on Monday, we reconfirmed and we had asked Bill Warren to continue to move forward on the ultra-low heavy-duty NOx rule. We talked about a number of issues. I think Bill Warren was part of the Bush administration and is actually a part of the last rulemaking on heavy-duty trucks. So he understands these air quality issues. And in fact, I learned this morning that he will be out next week, and I offered that he's in the area and wants to stop by and to see our sensor lab, to meet with some of our additional people and to get a better understanding of some of the things that we're doing. We're more than happy to host him. The fact of the matter is we've been a leader on technology issues, and I think that Bill understands certainly the technology advancement requirement. Not only is he an attorney, but he's also an engineer, so he also understands the very detailed technical aspects. So my long answer to you is I'm optimistic with regards to air quality, air impacts, and our ability to capitalize, if you will, to not only maintain the funding, but to increase the funding. And that still goes for the National Clean Air Fund, although I recognize the challenges that are going to be associated with that from a reopening of the Clean Air Act perspective. And we will have to be very collegial, collaborative, and engage in a lot of partnerships to make sure that if we go that way, we'll actually be able to do it in a way that maintains the integrity of the Clean Air Act and still provides some of the relief that we have with regards to NSR and other type issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that's very informative, because I think that as we go down this, we're setting long-term goals and objectives, that we have to keep those synchronizations in mind as it relates to what we are going to be spending most of our efforts on. So what you're saying is that, as we did last year, you have to spend a lot more time collaborating with the people at the federal level to make sure they understand the uniqueness and stuff of what we have here in our region.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Parker. And I think one of the other things that we're going to also have to do is work much more closely with the ports. And we've gotten the commitment from the directors, both Gene Soroka and Mario Cordero, to be much more aligned with our efforts, particularly as it comes back to DC. And I think with Mario Cordero's experience at MARAD, the Maritime Administration, and the previous administration, I think we can do a good job of making sure that we're keeping Congress and the administration covered.
Any other comments from committee members? Okay. Do we have any public comment on this item? Yes, Rita. Rita, come forward.
Does this require motion, Mr. Chairman?
Rita Luke.
I'm sorry.
It will require a motion. We'll hear from the public here. Good morning, Rita.
Good morning. Quick comment on the reduction of toxic emissions. I think this is a worthy goal, and I was at a public workshop yesterday for Rule 1469, and that's a toxics rule. And my comment was to urge the district to partner with some of these facilities that are trying to phase out chrome. And I think that would fit in well with these goals, and especially as we look for funding, I would urge the staff and the district to look into partnerships for the people that want to eliminate the toxic emissions, but they're small or medium-sized businesses that may not have the financial wherewithal to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you for those comments. Anyone else? Seeing none, we do need a motion on action item, on agenda item number 3.
I'll move the item.
Dr. Parker has moved the item. May I have a second?
Second.
I think Councilman Buscaino seconded. And roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Buscaino?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem McCallum?
Yes.
Dr. Parker?
Yes.
Supervisor Rutherford?
Aye.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right. The remaining item on the agenda is the written report from the Home Rule Advisory Group. We'll just ask you to take note of that. And is there any other business to come before the committee? Anyone on staff or any member of the committee want to bring anything forward? Seeing nothing, we can now move to public comment from the audience. And I'll ask if anyone has public comment. Yes. Harvey Eder?
Hello again. I'm Harvey Eder, speaking for myself and the Public Solar Power Coalition. There was an article in Tuesday's LA Times, it was in the first section on the front page, about the drought, that the drought wasn't the worst drought in 500 years like we expected. It was the worst drought in 1,200 years. And this study was done out of Stanford. And they say that the ice pack, the ice is melting in the Arctic, and there'll be open water in the summer in between 20 and 30 years. And that's going to change the weather patterns, and there'll be a 10 to 15% reduction in rain in California. So I want to incorporate that in by reference into the proceedings here.
Thank you. Thank you, Harvey. Thank you for those comments and for drawing our attention to those issues. Any other public comment? Seeing none. The next meeting date is Friday, January 12th, and so Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year to everyone, and we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.